shores of Lake Rotorua, in the heart of New Zealand, a dominion of the British Empire as far south of the equator as New York is north of it, are two quaintly situated townships occupied by Maori.
The Maori are the original people of Aotearoa, which we now call New Zealand. They are known for their haka dance, a performance art, and unique tattoos on their faces. Their ancestors were Polynesians, skilled navigators who traveled great distances across the ocean. They hunted massive birds, shocked European colonists, and created a rich culture in a land that was cut off from the world for a long time. So, who are the Maori? What's their story? And what's with the idea of a Trojan whale? Let's dig in. Around the 1300s, East Polynesians sailed in double-hulled canoes, called waka, for more than 4,000 kilometers across the open Pacific Ocean. They reached Aotearoa, a place no one back home could imagine. It was like a whole new world. According to the Nipuhi, a tribe in the far north, 1,000 years ago, the first Maori explorer to reach New Zealand was an ancestor named Coop. It is believed that Coop used the stars and ocean currents to find his way. Coop traveled across the Pacific in his waka harua, a special canoe from Hawaii. It's believed he later landed at a harbor in Northland. After Coop, more waka harua followed him to New Zealand. This wasn't random. It was a planned journey, also known as the Great Fleet in the 14th century. Over several hundred years, many people came over from Hawaii. The idea was to settle the land. They made trips back and forth, showing how connected they were to their origins, with each voyage becoming another step in building the Maori culture we see today. They stepped onto land that was vast compared to their small tropical islands. A typical Polynesian island was warm and sunny, but Aotearoa was a land with beaches, thick forests, wet swamps, big plains, and snow-capped mountains. It must have felt like stepping into a dream, full of resources just waiting for them. Once they got there, the Maori stopped building ocean-going ships. They had everything they needed around them, but they also got cut off from the rest of the world. The islands themselves had been isolated for about 80 million years, and this led to some strange things, like the almost complete absence of mammals. Instead, there were huge birds, most notably the moa. These flightless giants were about 3.6 meters tall and weighed around 230 kilograms. They had no natural predators, which made them easy to catch. Besides, the Maori, being good hunters, set out to catch these giant birds, living a semi-nomadic life while also growing crops. From about 1300 to 1500 CE, the moa, along with other big, flightless birds, were hunted to extinction. The Maori had brought rats and dogs with them, which contributed to this loss. With the big birds gone, the Maori had to turn back to farming. They were familiar with growing a variety of crops, but only few could thrive in Aotearoa's cooler climate. They grew crops like kumara, sweet potato, yam, taro, and paper mulberry. At that time, they also started using New Zealand flax for making clothing and fishing nets, as it was better suited to their new environment. To store the food they grew, the Maori dug large storage pits. They settled around these pits, creating hill forts called pei. Pahs were often built on elevated land, with strong walls, ditches, and hiding spots. It made it tough for any attackers to break in. You can still see remnants of these forts in New Zealand today. To tackle these pah without waiting out a long siege, creativity was key. One tribe, the Ngati Kuri, crafted a fake whale using dog hides. They placed it on the beach to grab the attention of the pah's defenders. When the defenders went to check it out, thinking they could snag some food, Ngati Kuri warriors jumped out and overpowered them. Turns out, hiding inside a fake animal isn't just limited to the Greeks. During times when the Maori community settled, art blossomed. They became skilled in wood carving called wakero and in crafting beautiful greenstone, called paunamu. They made all sorts of tools, ornaments, and unique items like heitaiki. Back in those days, they didn't see themselves that way. Identity was tied to family and iwi, tribal groups. Each iwi had hapu, or clans, that contained many members. Those in hapu were expected to support one another. Learning from the extinction of the big birds, Maori priests made some resources off limits. Until they recovered, the Rangatira were the noble people in Maori society. Their status and authority came from their ancestry through a concept called mana. Many may know mana as something from games, but for the Maori, it's a deep spiritual power tied to respect and influence. The more mana a person had, the more respected they were. Life was about growing and maintaining this mana. Utu, meaning reciprocation or balance, was essential in their interactions. If someone did a favor, they expected a return. The same went for insults. Failing to respond would cause a loss of mana. Positive Utu built friendships, while negative Utu could lead to wars over minor insults. War was common among the Maori. They fought for mana and resources, and this shaped their warrior culture. Combat was hand-to-hand, with one-on-one fights being crucial for gaining mana. Fighting was mostly in summer since their crops didn't travel well. This, along with the unique paw defenses, meant that wars often had fewer casualties. Many battles were more ceremonial. Before a fight, warriors would perform a battle haka to intimidate their enemies. The haka was a fierce dance, making them look mighty and scary. But the funny thing is, haka wasn't just for battle. There were haka for all sorts of occasions, from celebrations to farewells. In their free time, Maori enjoyed storytelling, music, and fishing. They even had fun songs called pair, which poked fun at others, sort of like today's diss tracks. Contests were held between hapu, where they'd meet, greet each other with a hongi feast, and showcase their talents. A major part of Maori culture is tattoos, or moko. Maori tattoos are distinct. Unlike regular tattoos, moko creates a textured scar, giving the appearance of carved wood or stone. Each moko was unique and told a different story about the person's lineage and mana. One important figure in Maori legends is Maui, a cheeky demigod associated with the wind and sea. Stories of him, stealing fire or slowing the sun, are famous. One myth tells that he fished the North Island from the ocean, leading to its Maori name, Te Ika a Maui, the fish of Maui. The Maori culture continued to thrive, but their isolation changed in December 1642 with a Dutch expedition led by Abel Janszoon Tasman. The Maori traded with their visitors for metal, mainly nails, which they found useful. But the ships also brought European diseases. On a lighter note, they also introduced potatoes. And soon enough, sweet potatoes became a key part of the Maori diet. By the early 1800s, European ships hunting seals and whales became common. The Maori spotted a chance and began selling food and shelter to the newcomers. By 1820, Maori were armed and began conflicts across the islands. The battles were different now. They weren't easy victories. Paw defenses evolved, turning from simple forts to structures that could withstand firepower. Throughout the 1830s, many iwi grew tired of fighting and attempted to make peace. But private companies and foreign powers eyed New Zealand as a colony. The British wanted to get involved. They created a treaty to convince the Maori to hand over control of their land. On February 5, 1840, about 500 Maori were presented with the Treaty of Waitangi, written in both English and Maori. The Maori text said the British would govern but Maori would retain authority over their land. The English version, however, claimed that they would hand over all rights and power without reservations. Around 40 chiefs signed it, believing they were protecting their sovereignty. They thought it would help manage European settlements and ensure their control over land. Most Maori never saw the treaty. The British interpreted it as giving them full rule over the Maori, making New Zealand a British colony. Initially, the Maori welcomed the Peka. They traded and intermarried, thinking the good relations would continue. But after the treaty, the Crown made land purchases in a way that frustrated the Maori. They would deal with one person, sometimes not even a member of the iwi, claiming it was a legitimate sale. Frustration led to conflicts, starting the Northern War in 1845. The New Zealand Wars followed, stretching into 1872. The Maori, despite being outnumbered, held their ground. The advancements in their paw defenses made a huge difference. Their structures could withstand much of the British artillery. By the end of the conflicts, the British began seizing land instead of buying it. The Maori lost control over their villages and resources. By 1890, most of the South Island and two-thirds of the North Island had been claimed by British settlers. The wars and land confiscations reduced the Maori population sharply, with those affected by diseases plummeting to just under 40,000 by 1896. During the early 20th century, living conditions for the Maori went downhill. They faced discrimination in hospitals, schools, and workplaces. Yet, during the World Wars, they proved themselves as some of New Zealand's most decorated battalions. As time went on, many Maori moved to cities searching for work but faced rejection in housing and jobs. Disconnect from their iwi and culture became common. By the 1970s, the Maori language was nearly gone, but the Maori refused to let their culture fade away. They began protest movements for rights and recognition of their identity. These efforts shaped the Race Relations Act of 1971, which aimed to eliminate racial discrimination. Protests concerning the treaty intensified, as the Maori wanted the government to acknowledge it. They didn't oppose the presence of peka, they sought fair treatment according to their laws. Weena Cooper, at age 80, famously marched across the country to protest for the land and culture of the Maori. This led to the Treaty of Waitangi Act in 1975, establishing the Waitangi Tribunal to address breaches of the treaty by the government. By the late 1970s, a cultural revival, or Maori Renaissance, began to flourish. Competitions of haka and poi brought communities together, and traditional canoes were again being built. The Maori language saw a resurgence through educational initiatives. Today, Maori identity has been revitalized and is respected. However, challenges remain, such as higher arrest rates and police encounters. Currently, Maori make up about 16.5% of New Zealand's population, and there's a strong effort to preserve and celebrate their culture. Today, both Maori and peka are working towards understanding and growing together, embracing a shared future. If you found this video fascinating, please don't hesitate to leave a like, comment, or share to someone to learn something today. Well, that's it for now. Have a good one.